Welcome back to another episode of Winning Through Culture. I'm Amanda Kramer, and I'm really excited for the conversation that Tim and I are going to have today. This is a topic that has been on my mind for a while, and it's something that we shared in our What You Can Expect Through Winning Through Culture episode that you just listened to a couple weeks ago, hopefully. And this is a conversation around finding or building purpose in your work. There is this element of having distinction between passion and purpose. And today, Tim and I are going to dig a little bit deeper into what that looks like if you're an entrepreneur, how that has come to fruition in his life as a leader, and just all the things related to purpose and passion. So, Tim?
Thank you very much, Amanda. It's good to be here with you today. And yes, we've talked about this topic for a while. I am interested in unpacking it a bit more with you. And I believe the starting point of discussion around purpose and passion really begins, if our listeners are familiar with the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It begins with an understanding of how people approach what they need. And I think from my experience in business and life, you see a continuum of people professionally, whether they're a business owner, or quite frankly, in their professional career, striving for success, which is ultimately defined differently by different people, but usually falls into a couple categories we'll come back to. And that striving for success, for those that are fortunate enough, leads to success. And then it leads to an entirely new conversation, which is, okay, what else is there?
Right.
What is my passion and purpose? Really, more so my purpose, because your passion is probably what fueled you through the success phase and got you to that point where you're now asking yourself, okay, there's got to be more to this. What's my purpose? And it's the transition that's been written about by a couple of wise people relative to the success to significance transition.
Yeah. Well, and I think a good place to start this dialogue is to define the difference between when it is something that you're passionate about or whether it is your purpose. So passion typically is that emotional aspect. It's something that's slightly more inward focused. It gets you motivated. It kind of is, okay, cool, I'm getting up every day and I'm doing this. Whereas you have your purpose, which is, you're not just born with what your purpose is. Sometimes you have to build it along the way, whereas passion you typically are. As far as purpose is concerned, that's your why. It's your ability and your contributions to the community that you serve. It's that greater component. What are you giving back at the end of the day? And I think the utopia of it all is when your passion and your purpose align, but more even specifically, you take into account kind of your superpowers. So when you have your talents, your passion, and your purpose, when all three of those things are in alignment, I think that's really where you get to that success and that place of, okay, I've reached the top of the mountain, and now what? So, Tim, maybe if you give a little bit of context of when you started out on your journey as a leader, did you start with your passion or your purpose?
I would say that I started with something even more basic than that.
All right.
So I think that whether you're a professional or business owner, and speak to being a business owner, is you've got to make enough money to survive, feed your family, have your business be successful, operate, generate enough revenue to reinvest in your business, hire people, do all the things that a business needs to do to be successful.
And maybe not just have to eat ramen.
Well, that's a college thing, or perhaps after college, depending on the success of your business. So that I know is got to be satiated first. Now, it's your passion, back to your definition there, Amanda, your passion may cause you to choose your profession. If you're fortunate and or the business you start, it's something you are excited about. It's something you enjoy. It's something you have positive energy about. And it's something that pushes you through the challenges that inevitably come along, because they will come. That's a guarantee. So I know, for me, at least, my first objective, I had a passion to help people. I had a passion for how the financial services industry could impact people's lives. And I had a very strong need to find a way to build a business and have an income that could sustain that business and sustain my family. So the passion is what got me going
Right.
and kept me going, quite frankly, when things did not go according to plan. But until I was able to meet that first need as a business owner, truthfully, the passion is what you got to push you through. The purpose piece for most people, I think, comes later.
Mm-hmm. It gets built as you're working through
Mhm.
those successes and those challenges that you face.
Yes.
So, what are some questions that you asked yourself along the way as your purpose was coming to fruition, as you moved from that initial need to really leaning into those passions that you have to get you through maybe those challenging times? What are some of the questions that helped you form where your purpose ultimately landed?
Well, the questions ultimately for purpose are, what am I uniquely gifted to do?
Mhm. Your superpowers.
Yes, your
Yep.
superpowers. And I know for me, at least, it was very difficult for me to see that. I had to have other people help me tease that out. I remember doing an exercise right around the time I was 30. I went to a few people that I trusted and respected and said, what do you see me being good at? And by the way, I've done that since then, as recently as last year, because it's definitely something that changes over time
Mhm.
as you acquire skills and experiences. So my first question is, what am I good at? What did God kind of gift me to do in this lifetime? The second question then becomes, is it something that I actually enjoy?
Right.
Because you may be good at something that doesn't really satisfy you.
Yeah.
And I don't know that that's often the case, but I can think of some instances where I've seen that. So the second question then is, what do I really enjoy? And then the third question is, again, back to the business aspect of this, is that something that the world sees value in?
Hmm.
Can I create value in that? Can I transmit that value to other people and in turn be remunerated for that, compensated for that, and again, build a business around that?
So, said another way, that last question that you were discussing is really the world is a better place because I'm in it and the ability that I had to produce X,
Mhm.
whatever that might look like. So, if you talk about the alignment of your talents, so the superpowers question, the alignment of, do you have satisfaction? Do you have the passion at the end of the day to be able to come to the table every single time and say, I am putting or pouring rather 1,000% of myself into this. And then, is the community that I'm in or the world as a whole, is it better because I'm able to have this
Mhm.
value that I bring to the table?
Yeah, I fundamentally believe we all have unique gifts. We're all bringing something unique to the world. Many people, unfortunately, I believe, also don't ever figure out what that is because they're not intentional about it. This is definitely a very intentional act. It's one thing to have an inkling as to what excites you and what you're interested in. It's a whole nother thing, though, to organize your life around it and to make it come to fruition and to bring it forth and ultimately bear fruit. So there's definitely a pathway here that, again, my fundamental belief is at some point in the journey of life, the vast majority of people are going to ask themselves, why am I here? What is this about? And what is my purpose?
Mhm.
And some people get great clarity of that. I know early in their life, some people never get that. Some people never ask the question.
I was going to say, it might go back to the
Yeah,
questions like,
yeah.
are you
Yeah.
constantly.
Because the success equation says make more money, get more awards, do more things.
To do more things? There's
Yes,
all,
do
it's all,
more
yeah,
things, get more things. And that's the success equation of our society today is, be famous. How many followers do you have? All
Right.
that stuff says that's what success is. Yet I know from my own experience and talking to a lot of other business owners and entrepreneurs that at some point that's not enough.
Well, and if a entrepreneur that's listening, if they wanted to reach out, or somebody that potentially, you have a relationship with, no matter where you are in that relationship cycle, if they were to come to you and say, as I'm building this business or as I'm starting out, whatever phase of life they're in, and they said, do I start with something I'm just good at, or do I start with something I'm passionate about? What would your advice be for that individual?
Great question, man.
That's not a heavy question at all.
But I think it gets back to ultimately the ideal situation is both.
Right? Yeah.
you're doing something you enjoy, you're doing something that you feel some inkling that you were created to do, and it's something that you can do successfully from a standpoint of building a business around or having a career around. And again, how many people in life pursue other people's vision of their life? They go and get a degree in any profession because someone else told them that's what they should do.
Right.
Not because it's something that necessarily they're passionate about, not because it's something they necessarily feel they're good at. And again, our society says, well, if you're a doctor or you're a lawyer, or you're a certain profession, you can make a lot of money, which is true. Yet make a lot of money is typically not the purpose that people lean into or land on
Right.
when they eventually get there.
Yeah.
That may be a byproduct of this intersection of passion and purpose and ultimately finding your way in your work and your business life. But I don't think that's the end all be all.
Well, it's interesting that you comment about like getting a degree in a particular subject or area in which you just kind of somebody landed on one day and said, you should be X. I think that at least in my daily life, I don't really come across a lot of people who declared a major and graduated with that major. And then today either have not shifted or outside of, even a doctor, maybe their specialty is different than they originally thought it was going to be. There's that room for adaptability because you're working on building your purpose as you go. So I think that's important to note that it's not, okay, day one, you decided, and then that's the only thing. You do have to be laser focused if you want to build it, but you can have some room for flexibility, I guess is the best word to use.
Well, and I think that's the right word to use because, again, it's an iterative process.
Right.
I believe few people are blessed enough to, in their 20s, figure out this is why I was created. This is exactly why I'm here. And this is exactly what I'm going to do about that.
Mm-hmm.
I think most people spend a lifetime pursuing that. And again, in a business setting, if you're creating value for whomever your clients are, that can still be something you're passionate about. And you clearly can find your purpose in that.
Yeah.
In my mind.
Well, and as a leader, the intersection, as we said, that utopia of having your purpose and your passion and your special talents or your superpowers, as I like to call them, all come together is obtainable. But we talk a lot about on this podcast around as a leader, how that gets put into the evolving culture of your organization, whether it's you and one other person, whether it's 50 people, 100 people, whatever it might look like. And we go back to this book quite often, but I have it here. And it's The Culture Solution by Matthew Kelly. And on one of the pages, he articulates a dynamic culture cannot make employees happy, but it can make fulfillment and happiness at work a lot more obtainable. And I think about that in the context of a leader and the discussion that we're having today around purpose and passion. If the leader is working towards that, the ability for them to then pour their purpose and their passion into the organization then results in a culture that others can find their way, find and build their purpose within. So I think having the discussion as a leader, as a business owner, entrepreneur, whatever word you want to utilize there, is there a way in which entrepreneurs, leaders can create space or that you have seen that they can create space to help others as they're going on that same journey of building their purpose? Is there anything that comes to mind?
Yes. In fact, there is. I think, Amanda, that the imperative of a leader to create a winning culture that unlocks people's passions and purpose is to be intentional in the formation of that culture. And what I mean by that is to acknowledge that the purpose of the business and to discuss the purpose of the business isn't just to make the bottom line.
Right.
Now, the business needs to make a bottom line in order to sustain itself and offer all these wonderful opportunities I'm about to speak about. So that's important back to my earlier comments. If the economic security is not there, the rest of this is going to go out the window because of, again, the hierarchy of human needs. But with the security of a well-established business, the intentionality I believe an entrepreneur has to have is recognizing that everybody in that organization has unique gifts. Everybody has passions and interests, and everybody ultimately is here for a purpose. Mm-hmm. And as the leader, are you formulating a culture that speaks to helping people identify what are you good at, what do you enjoy, whether it's in the actual job you've been hired to, or on a project team or some other way, how can we help you explore that further, unpack that, kind of foster that? So that's number one. Number two, then, is really an open dialogue that everybody's here for a purpose. Again, that's not necessarily, certainly in a large corporate environment, you're not going to see that conversation because it's about quarterly earnings and it's about all this. But as an entrepreneur of a small business, you have an amazing opportunity to create a culture that people want to come be a part of because you're giving them an opportunity to pursue something they're passionate about. Obviously, it needs to be in alignment with what the business needs. And a good leader can make that happen, let's say 80% of the time. And that same process in my mind allows them then to begin to find their purpose and really get in alignment with that. And sometimes that alignment may mean they're not with that organization anymore. Other times it may mean that they are truly suited and uniquely gifted for a particular need the business has, and it gives them a chance to grow into an entirely new role or grow up in a role. But that's, to me, the imperative. If you're going to create a winning culture around people pursuing their passion and finding their purpose in life, that's one of the key things you're going to have to address. There's another one we'll come to in a moment, but those two things I think are really critical. And in doing that, again, I know that a business can create a culture that people want to be a part of.
Well, in a future episode, so flash forwarding here just a little bit, you do have a really interesting dialogue with a individual, Debbie Millhouse, and talking about when that opportunity arises for someone to seek employment in some capacity, how the purpose and passion, how that all goes into the talent management and talent strategy component of being an entrepreneur and a small business owner, which I think is really cool. So I know these tendencies and discussion points that we're having today are also going to be part of that dialogue too. So I do hope that our listeners will tune in. But you mentioned the concept of having that space in a small business where an individual can work to figure out and or build their purpose and really lean into the passion and the things that they're good at. Do you find that as a leader, having that annual performance conversation, that you build space in there to have dialogue around the passion or the purpose of the individual? Or do you think that that's a separate?
I think it's an ongoing dialogue.
Okay.
I do. And I think it's in that ongoing dialogue, there's an intentionality to it. And it's easy to get busy and lose sight of that or just have it fall off the radar. So I do believe it's imperative that both parties make a commitment to not let that happen. And so that the employee doesn't just assume the leader's going to do it. And the leader doesn't just assume the employee will bring it up if it's important to them. Let's just recognize it's important.
Yeah.
But I think it's an ongoing conversation. I think there are moments in time that are inflection points where you're going to then decide what progress have we made? What have we learned over some period of time? And yeah, a year is a good period of time to give something enough germination, if you will, to unfold, whether that's a calendar year or 12-month span. I do believe that that is an appropriate time frame, but I do also very strongly believe that it can't be something you put in a box and say, we'll talk about this 12 months from now.
And honestly, you saying that sparked a thought around how you and I, and again, a lot of the dialogue that we have here comes from our daily experience in our organization. But this is applicable to any industry, any place. Doesn't matter if you're running on a particular operating system or not. We use the concept of having quarterly conversations. And so maybe you can express a little bit around how those come to fruition. And for me, that gives me a lot of grace in the dialogue to say, here is what I'm passionate about. Here are the things I want to focus on. Here is how I need you as a leader to show up for me. Can you maybe talk a little bit?
I can talk about it. I can talk about it with the understanding that I need a little grace because I haven't been really good the last 2 quarters of doing my quarterlies, but they are on the calendar this year. Yeah, the idea in EOS of a quarterly is really a 90-minute block to get out of the office, get away from the day-to-day. It's not a performance review. It's really a two-way conversation about how am I doing, how are you doing, and how are we doing together in essence, and what's upcoming relative to how you want to grow professionally. And I also like to look at where people want to. Personally, that's a decision that everyone makes unique to themselves as to whether they want to share that or not. And then, the question becomes, as a leader, what can I do to support your efforts in that regard?
Mhm.
And it is a rich conversation. I've had some pretty significant breakthroughs in those conversations with the people that I work with, both learnings for myself and, quite frankly, understandings for them. And it gives you a chance to course correct, back to the fact that
Mhm.
it's an iterative process. If I put it in a box and I revisit it once a year, that's too far of a time frame to course correct.
Right.
You could be way off course. And so the quarterly really does help calibrate more nuanced course corrections to get us back on track.
Well, and for me, being a participant in quarterlies with you, and then also having individuals that I have quarterlies with, it's one of the best opportunities to take a break, as you said, from the business and really just talk about where the person's passions lie and have that dialogue on where they want to go. And as a leader, how you can help them do that. And as I shared, I think it's applicable no matter the industry, no matter your business size. You can take 90 minutes a quarter for those that you directly support to have that conversation. And it does give you that pivot point of making sure that where their passions and their talents, that they're aligning to their purpose. And then ultimately, hopefully, right, to get to that point of utopia where all three things come together.
I do want to touch on that.
All right.
We talked about this podcast not sounding like everything's rainbow and roses.
Yeah, it's not.
And I want to talk about the reality of all these wonderful things, which is it's hard. It's really hard.
Mhm.
And I actually suspect that some entrepreneurs or business owners don't want to go down this path because it is hard. And it's like, whoa, that's messy. I don't know that I want to know all that information about a person. I don't know that I want the responsibility then to have to, just come here and do your job, basically, is the mindset of so many businesses. And that's your stuff to work out on your own time, not here. Now, as a leader, I've chosen a different path.
Right.
We've chosen a different path as an organization. But I think it's really important to call out the fact that it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard on two fronts. It's hard as the leader because, in my experience, you're getting people perhaps to think about things they would not have thought about on their own and kind of opening a bit of a Pandora's box.
Yeah, that ideation, right?
Yeah. And it's like,
visionary piece.
Wait a minute. Yeah. And so you do open yourself up, in essence, to some conversations that may not be in alignment with what you as the leader or the entrepreneur were hoping for. But the other piece that's hard, and this is equally as challenging, is I think it's hard on the person that is exploring this. And the ultimate challenge in pursuing your passion and your purpose and aligning that in a way that creates value that you get compensated well for is that the work itself is hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I see too many people get a picture and a glimpse of what that looks like and get very excited about it. And then when it's time to do the work, for lack of a better word, peace out. And they're like, hey, it's the old adage of, I want to be healthy and fit, back to we're not doing New Year's resolution conversations.
That's right.
But all the things that fall on that list are with the best of intentions, just as this whole experience of identifying all of this is the best of intentions. But then for the person that's in the business, not the leader, it's hard for the leader, but for the employee that has decided this is something they want to engage in, I think they really can run up against, wow, this is hard, which then brings you back to where you started, which is this really what you're passionate about?
Right.
And is this really where you feel called? That's the piece that I see as well. And so as a entrepreneur or business owner, just, and again, the full disclosure category, this isn't rainbows and roses, is by adopting this type of approach in your culture, you are opening yourselves up, in my opinion, to some challenges that most businesses might not face. And at the same time, though, for those employees that do the work and push through the hard, easy, you as an entrepreneur will see some amazing transformations in people. And to me, that is worth it. That is worth all the hard work. That's worth some of the heartache. that's worth some of the challenges that come and the disruptions that may come to the business to see people in essence transformed. And again, I can speak to my own daughter who went through this process and left our organization after 8 years. And she is pursuing her passion. She's pursuing, quite frankly, something that I think she was built to do at a very young age, which is, I've told her repeatedly, you're so fortunate to be in alignment with that. And she still has challenges every day. And so that doesn't mean all of this being discovered will eliminate challenges in your life. It will just illuminate the challenges that need to be overcome, and trust that it'll give you the energy and the fortitude to move through those challenges.
Yeah. Well, a lot to unpack in the dialogue around where your
I'm passionate
passion.
about this.
You are, which is wonderful. I see it every day because I get the good fortune of working with you. And it's a hard decision as a leader to jump into really the deep end with people and let them explore and have conversations that they might be having internally with themselves. They might be having it with someone outside of the organization, but encouraging that dialogue. It kind of is like a unicorn in business for those that I've encountered. And so it's an opportunity to lean into it. It might not be the right decision for you, but it is something to consider how, as a individual, as a leader, as a business owner, you want to support that dialogue for those that are in your community, in your pod. And so we hope that you found the information that we shared with you insightful. Hopefully there's a nugget or two that you can take away as you're working to build your winning culture. And ultimately, we hope that your passion and your purpose and your talents are aligned. And we look forward to having more conversation around how these things come to fruition over the course of several episodes to come. And one of the things I think is important just to note, again, Tim said it, but I think needs to be reiterated. It is hard. It's a hard decision to make. And you might come across some points that you weren't quite ready for yet. But
You will.
You will. Okay,
You won't.
You will.
Not might. You will.
You will.
I promise.
And allowing those individuals to step into that, to jump in the deep end with you. As Tim said, those experiences are very fruitful. And you might be ready for that in a couple years. You might be ready for it now.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Amanda. Again, I do appreciate you leaning into pursuing your passion and purpose here as we do this journey in business and life together. So I thank you for that. And I would just say before I end this podcast, my last comment on this is I appreciate the inspiration you provide in my life. And for business owners that choose this path, you will be inspired. Again, you will suffer heartache, but you will be inspired, and the inspiration will lift you up in ways that you can't imagine. And my encouragement is be around people that inspire you. You inspire me. So thank you for that.
That's very kind.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Winning Through Culture. Thanks for being with us today.
Be well.